It was a quiet evening, the kind where the streets seemed to hum softly under the glow of the streetlights. Officer Daniel sat in his patrol car, parked near a gas station at the edge of town. The air was cool, and the soft rhythm of rain tapped on the windshield. He sipped his coffee, staring out into the dimly lit road, watching cars pass by one after another. Nothing seemed out of place, until a dark luxury car pulled into the lot across the street. Daniel squinted, his eyes narrowing. The car was too clean, too expensive, and the man behind the wheel didn't look like he belonged in this neighborhood, or at least that's what Daniels thought. The man inside was calm, scrolling on his phone, waiting for someone maybe. But to Daniels it looked suspicious. His instincts, or rather his bias, told him something wasn't right. He put down his coffee and started the car. The police lights stayed off, but his suspicion burned bright enough. "Let's see what we've got here," he muttered to himself, pulling out of the lot. The sound of the police radio crackled faintly, though no call had come through. He didn't need one. He convinced himself this was part of his duty, to check what others might overlook. The car began to move, slowly pulling onto the main road. Daniels followed, his eyes fixed on the license plate. Everything was in order. The car wasn't speeding. No taillights were out, no signals missed. Still, something inside him whispered that he should pull it over. And so he did. The red and blue lights flashed in the night. The driver's car slowed and pulled to the side, smooth and steady. Daniel stepped out, adjusting his belt, his hand resting near his holster, out of habit or maybe out of something else. He approached the driver's side window. The man rolled it down halfway and looked up at him, calm and respectful. "Good evening, officer. Is there a problem?" The man asked. Daniels didn't answer right away. He leaned down, his flashlight shining across the interior, glancing over the dashboard, the seats, the man's hands resting on the steering wheel. Everything looked perfectly fine, but his tone carried a weight of suspicion anyway. "License and registration," he said curtly. The man nodded, reaching slowly for his wallet. "Sure, it's in the glove compartment. I'm going to get it now, all right?" Daniels nodded stiffly, his flashlight following every movement. The man handed over the documents, polite and composed. Daniels scanned them quickly. Everything matched, everything was clean. But he kept his voice sharp. "What are you doing out here tonight?" he asked. "I just finished a long day at work," the man said. "Heading home, but I stopped to grab something to eat." Daniels frowned slightly. "At this hour? You sure you're not up to something else?" The man gave a small, confused smile. "Something else? I'm not sure what you mean, officer." Daniels straightened up, walking slowly around the car, shining his light along the sides. The car gleamed under the streetlight. New tires, polished body, spotless windows. It looked expensive. Too expensive, he thought again. He didn't say it out loud, but the thought lingered. Back at the window, Daniels returned the documents but didn't step away. "You live around here?" "Yes, about 20 minutes away," the man replied. Daniels crossed his arms. "Mind stepping out of the car for a minute?" The man looked surprised. "Is there a reason for that, officer?" "It's just a routine check," Daniels said flatly. "Step out of the vehicle." For a moment the man hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't argue. He unbuckled his seatbelt and stepped out into the cool night. His tone remained calm, even as his eyes reflected a quiet frustration. Daniels, meanwhile, stood tall, keeping a hand near his belt again. The street was mostly empty, but a few people at the nearby gas station started watching. A couple of them lifted their phones, recording from a distance. The tension was subtle but heavy, like a string pulled tight. Daniels began asking questions: where he worked, why he drove such a car, where he was going. The man answered politely each time without raising his voice. But Daniels kept pushing, convinced that something didn't add up. "Can I ask what this is really about?" the man finally said softly. Daniels looked at him sharply. "It's about making sure everything's in order." "You don't need to question my job." The man exhaled slowly, trying to stay patient. "I understand that, officer. But you pulled me over without a reason." "I haven't done anything wrong." Daniels's voice hardened. "Don't tell me how to do my job." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sounds were the hum of the car's engine and the faint drizzle beginning again. The man looked at the wet pavement, his reflection trembling in the puddle beneath the flashing lights. He seemed to be measuring his words carefully. "I just want to get home," he said quietly. Daniel stared at him, trying to find something, anything, to justify his suspicion. But there was nothing. The man's car was clean. His papers were perfect. His attitude was respectful. Still, Daniels didn't lower his guard. Years of unchallenged behavior had built habits he didn't even recognize as wrong. He walked to the back of the car, pretending to check the trunk area, the plate, the rear lights. Every movement was more about buying time than finding truth. Inside, a small voice tried to whisper that he might be wrong, that maybe he was seeing danger where there was none. But pride and ego have a way of speaking louder. When Daniels returned to the front, the man was still standing by the open door, waiting silently. The flashing lights made stripes of red and blue across his face, soft and steady. Daniels glanced at the small crowd at the gas station. They were still watching, phones up, recording everything. "Something wrong, officer?" the man asked again. Daniels hesitated. For the first time, he felt the weight of all those eyes on him. The night didn't feel quiet anymore. It felt tense, judgmental. He looked at the man, then at the car, then back again. Finally, he sighed, trying to sound composed. "You can go," he said shortly. "Next time, don't hang around parking lots so late. It draws attention." The man gave a faint, polite smile. "Understood." He got back in his car, closing the door gently. Daniels turned and walked back to his patrol car, trying to ignore the murmurs coming from across the street. The man's car pulled away smoothly, disappearing into the night without a trace of anger or defiance. Inside his cruiser, Daniels sat for a moment, staring out through the rain-streaked windshield. He told himself he'd done the right thing, that it was just part of the job. But deep down, something unsettled him. It wasn't guilt exactly, not yet, but an uneasy awareness that he might have crossed a line without realizing it. He picked up his radio and pretended to check in with dispatch just to fill the silence. The sound of his own voice grounded him. He didn't mention the stop, though. He never did. A few blocks away, the man drove in silence. The road stretched ahead, empty and glistening. His hands were steady on the wheel, but his mind wasn't. He'd done everything right, spoken calmly, followed directions, shown respect, and still he'd been treated like a suspect. He let out a slow breath, reminding himself that losing his temper would never help. He had seen nights like this before, too many times. Still, he couldn't shake the thought that the officer hadn't even realized how wrong it was, how natural it had felt to assume the worst. That kind of blindness was dangerous, but for now he pushed it aside. There would be another day, another moment to deal with what had just happened. He had learned to carry these moments quietly, like invisible scars that only he could feel. Back at the station, Daniels filled out a brief note in his logbook. Routine traffic check. No violations. It was a simple line, one that covered everything and said nothing. He didn't write about the man or the look in his eyes, or the uneasy feeling that followed him long after the car disappeared. Outside, the rain began to fall harder, washing over the streets, softening the edges of everything. The night went back to being quiet again, but it wasn't the same kind of quiet anymore. Somewhere deep inside, both men knew this was just the beginning of something bigger, a moment that would soon circle back in a way neither could have imagined. The next morning started off slow. The city was waking up, the streets still damp from the rain the night before. Officer Daniels was back on patrol, his mind replaying flashes of the previous night. The man's calm face, the phone cameras, the quiet unease that had followed him home. He told himself it didn't matter. He had done his job just like always, but something about it stuck with him, like a small pebble caught in his shoe. He tried to push it away. The radio crackled, dispatch giving updates about traffic and minor disturbances. The day went on as usual until early evening, when he spotted a familiar car. The same dark luxury vehicle from last night, parked outside a coffee shop downtown. Daniels frowned. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered, slowing down his cruiser. He told himself it was a coincidence, but his mind began building stories again. Maybe the man was meeting someone shady. Maybe the car was stolen. Maybe last night he had missed something. Curiosity mixed with pride pulled him in. He parked across the street and watched. Through the coffee shop window, the same man sat at a corner table, laptop open, talking quietly on the phone. He looked professional, confident, well-dressed, but to Daniels, that somehow made him more suspicious. He waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. When the man stood up to leave, Daniels started his car and followed again. The man got into his car, drove calmly through traffic, and took the same route heading toward the highway. Daniel's heart began to beat faster. "Let's see where you're headed this time," he murmured, one hand resting on the steering wheel, the other near his radio. After a few blocks, Daniels turned on his lights again. The red and blue glow reflected off passing windows. The man pulled over once more, smooth and steady, just as he had the night before. Daniels stepped out, his boots crunching against the wet pavement. His tone this time was sharper. "Evening again," he said, approaching the window. "Mind telling me why you're driving around here 2 nights in a row?" The man looked up, surprised but calm. "Officer, is there a problem again?" "I just finished a meeting. I'm heading home." Daniels didn't answer right away. He peered inside the car, his flashlight tracing the man's face. There was no sign of stress, no fear, just quiet confusion. That somehow irritated Daniels more. "License and registration," he said again, though he already knew the documents were clean. The man sighed softly but complied. "Here you go." Same as last night. Daniels took them, pretending to study them again. "You know, people don't usually hang around this area unless they've got business that needs explaining." The man blinked slowly. "I told you. I had a meeting. That's all." Daniels stepped back, circling the car once more. A few cars passed by, drivers slowing down to see what was happening. The flashing lights reflected off the rain puddles, painting streaks of red and blue on the asphalt. A couple walking by stopped to watch. Someone across the street lifted their phone to record. Daniels felt the pressure building but wouldn't let go. "Step out of the vehicle," he ordered. The man hesitated this time. "Officer, with all due respect, I don't see any reason for this. I'm not breaking any laws. You've already seen my documents." Daniel's voice hardened. "I said step out." The man exhaled slowly and unbuckled his seatbelt again. He stepped out, his movements careful. His posture was calm, but there was a hint of tiredness in his eyes, like a man used to proving his innocence when he shouldn't have to. "Put your hands on the hood," Daniel said. The man's expression changed slightly. "Is that really necessary?" "It's procedure," Daniel said quickly, avoiding his gaze. "Just do it." The man did as told, resting his palms gently on the cool surface of the car. Daniels checked his pockets and the inside of his jacket. Nothing, not even a wallet, because it was already in Daniel's hand. Still, Daniels kept searching as if trying to find something that didn't exist. When he found nothing, he straightened up, glancing around. More people had gathered now. Some whispered quietly, others just watched. The atmosphere was thick with discomfort. Daniels could feel the weight of their eyes. "Officer," the man said softly without turning around, "you've searched me, you've checked my license, and you've asked all your questions. Can you please tell me what crime I've committed?" Daniels didn't answer. He didn't have one, but pride kept him from admitting it. "We've had reports of suspicious vehicles in the area," he said quickly. "You matched the description." The man turned slightly, his voice calm but firm. "That's strange. I was sitting in a coffee shop surrounded by people. I doubt I looked suspicious there." Daniels tightened his jaw. "Sir, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" The man repeated quietly, looking over his shoulder. "I'm cooperating. You're the one turning nothing into something." Before Daniels could respond, another patrol car pulled up. A younger officer stepped out. It was Ramirez, fresh-faced, polite, and always careful with his words. He walked over, lowering his voice as he spoke. "Everything all right here, Daniels?" "Yeah," Daniels said quickly. "Just checking something." Ramirez glanced at the man and froze for a second. His eyes widened slightly in recognition. "Wait, sir, I know you," he said, his tone shifting. "You work at headquarters, don't you?" The man nodded slowly, his eyes steady. "That's right." Ramirez's expression grew serious. He looked at Daniels, trying to choose his words carefully. Daniels, can I talk to you for a second?" Daniels frowned. "What for?" "I've got this under control." "It's important," Ramirez insisted softly, motioning him aside. They stepped a few feet away, but the man could still see them talking. "What is it?" Daniels asked impatiently. Ramirez lowered his voice. "That man? He's not just someone from headquarters. He's the new head of internal affairs." Daniels blinked, his mouth going dry. "What?" "Yeah," Ramirez said quietly. "He's the one they brought in to oversee officer conduct. The chief mentioned him at the last meeting. I think you just pulled over your boss." Daniels' stomach tightened. He looked back toward the man, who now stood quietly by his car, hands at his sides. There was no anger in his expression, just a calm, almost knowing patience. the kind that came from experience. For a moment, Daniels didn't know what to do. His mind raced. The crowd was still there, watching. The cameras were still pointed his way. If he backed down too suddenly, it would look bad. But if he pushed further, it could end his career. He walked back toward the man, his heart pounding. He handed back the documents with a forced smile. "Looks like everything's fine. You can go." The man didn't take the papers right away. He looked at Daniel steadily, his voice even. "You stopped me twice in 2 days for no reason. Is this your idea of proper conduct?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Sir, just following up on a report." The man finally took the documents. "Reports should be based on facts, not assumptions, officer." Daniels didn't reply. His throat felt tight, his face burning. He could feel Ramirez's uneasy gaze behind him. The man got into his car again, glancing once more at Daniels before closing the door. "Have a good evening," he said simply, then drove off into the night. The flashing lights faded as his car disappeared down the road. Daniels stood there, frozen. Ramirez looked at him, hesitant to speak. "You really didn't know, did you?" Daniels shook his head slowly. "No, I thought he looked out of place." Ramirez sighed. "You should be careful with assumptions, man. You never know who you're talking to." Daniels didn't answer. He turned off his lights and got back in his cruiser. The radio was silent. The only sound was the rain tapping on the roof again, the same rhythm as the night before, but this time it didn't feel peaceful. It felt like a warning. He sat there for a long time watching the empty road, realizing the damage was already done. Somewhere inside, the unease he'd felt before began to grow into something heavier, something like fear mixed with regret, but it was too late to take it back. Across town, the man drove in silence again, this time with a different thought running through his mind. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed.
He had hoped things like this didn't happen so easily anymore.
But here it was, another example of how deep assumptions ran. He knew he'd have to address it soon. Not just for himself, but for the sake of those who couldn't speak up as calmly as he had. The night carried on quietly, but for both men, something had changed. One carried shame he didn't want to admit. The other carried truth he could no longer ignore. The following morning felt heavier than usual. The air inside the station was thick with chatter, the usual buzz of officers swapping stories over coffee and paperwork. Officer Daniels tried to act normal, pretending to listen to the jokes and casual talk, but his mind was far from the room. He hadn't slept well. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the man's calm stare and heard the quiet, steady voice saying, "Reports should be based on facts, not assumptions." He told himself again that it wasn't a big deal. The man hadn't filed a complaint, at least not yet. Maybe it would all just fade away. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that the storm hadn't passed. It was only waiting. As he sat at his desk flipping through incident reports, the station doors opened. Conversation stopped. Heads turned. The man from the night before walked in, this time not in casual clothes, but in a crisp suit and badge that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. His presence was calm yet commanding, the kind that made the whole room straighten up without a word. Daniels froze. The coffee cup in his hand felt suddenly too light, his pulse too loud. The man walked past the front desk, speaking quietly with the captain. They shook hands. A few officers exchanged puzzled looks, whispering under their breath. When the captain raised his hand for attention, the room went silent. "Everyone," the captain announced, "this is Mr. Green. He's been appointed as the new head of internal affairs for our division. He'll be conducting regular evaluations and oversight on officer performance and conduct. I expect full cooperation and professionalism." Daniel's stomach dropped. The name echoed in his head, internal affairs. The very department that handled misconduct, complaints, and officer accountability. The very man he had pulled over twice without cause was now standing at the front of the room. His boss's boss. Mr. Green gave a polite nod to the room. His tone was measured, even friendly. "I'm not here to interfere with good work," he said. "I'm here to make sure we all hold ourselves to the same standard we expect from the public. Respect, fairness, and discipline are what make this badge mean something." His eyes scanned the room, and for just a second they met Daniel's. It wasn't an angry look. It wasn't even stern. It was something worse, quiet recognition. Daniels quickly looked down at his notepad, pretending to write something. When the meeting ended, the officers broke into hushed groups. Some whispered about how serious internal affairs could be. Others shrugged it off. Daniels stayed at his desk, trying to seem invisible. But it didn't last long. The captain walked over and said, "Daniels, Mr. Green wants to see you in his office. Now." Daniels' throat went dry. "Me?" The captain nodded once. "Yes, don't make him wait." He stood slowly, trying to compose himself as he walked down the hall. The sound of his boots against the tile floor echoed louder than usual. When he reached the door marked Internal Affairs, Division Head, he paused. He took a deep breath, knocked lightly, and heard a calm voice say, "Come in." The office was simple, neatly organized, papers stacked, a small plant by the window, and a framed quote on the wall. "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." Mr. Green sat behind the desk, typing something on his computer. He looked up and gave a polite nod. "Officer Daniels," he said. "Please have a seat." Daniels hesitated, then sat across from him. His hands fidgeted slightly in his lap. "I'm guessing you already know why I wanted to talk," Mr. Green said, his tone calm but firm. Daniels cleared his throat. "Yes, sir. I think I do." Mr. Green leaned back slightly, studying him. 2 nights in a row. No reason for the stop, no report filed, no violation noted. "Do you usually pull people over twice in 24 hours without a cause?" Daniels looked down. "No, sir. I just thought the situation looked off." "Off?" Mr. Green repeated quietly. "What does that mean?" Daniels hesitated, searching for words. The car, the area, the time, it just seemed suspicious. "I was trying to be cautious." Mr. Green nodded slowly. "I see. And did your caution uncover anything illegal?" "No, sir." "So, the only thing suspicious," Mr. Green said softly, "was me?" Daniels opened his mouth but couldn't find an answer. The silence that followed was heavy. Mr. Green didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His calmness did more damage than shouting ever could. "I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years, Mr. Green continued. "I know what a real threat looks like. And I also know what bias looks like. I'm not here to punish you, Officer Daniels. I'm here to make you see the difference." Daniels shifted uncomfortably. I know you didn't mean harm," Mr. Green interrupted gently. "But meaning well doesn't erase the harm done. You stopped me because you assumed I didn't belong where I was. You saw what you wanted to see." Daniels stared at the floor. "You're right, sir. I made a mistake." Mr. Green nodded once. "Mistakes can be corrected. Patterns cannot. Which one this becomes is up to you." The words hit harder than Daniels expected. He wanted to defend himself, to explain, but the truth was there, undeniable. Mr. Green wasn't out for revenge. He was out for accountability. After a moment, Mr. Green leaned forward slightly. "Tell me something, Daniels. How long have you been on the force?" 13 years, Daniels said quietly. "Then you should know that this job isn't just about enforcing the law," Mr. Green said. "It's about trust. When you use your badge, people should feel safe, not scared. If they fear you more than they trust you, then we've lost our purpose." Daniels nodded slowly, his voice low. "Yes, sir." Mr. Green's expression softened slightly. "I don't expect perfection. I expect awareness. I'll be observing how you handle yourself going forward. Consider this a lesson, not a punishment." Daniels finally looked up. "Thank you, sir." Mr. Green stood, signaling the meeting was over. "You can go back to work now. And, Daniels, try to see people as individuals, not assumptions. It'll make you a better officer and a better man." Daniels nodded, stood, and left the office quietly. The hallway felt longer than before. Every step echoed with the weight of the conversation. Back at his desk, a few officers looked up, curious. He just waved them off and sat down, staring blankly at his computer screen. For the rest of the day, Daniels couldn't focus. Every sound in the station seemed louder. The ringing phones, the chatter, the footsteps. He kept thinking about what Mr. Green had said. Patterns cannot be corrected unless you face them. That evening, when his shift ended, he drove home in silence. The sun was setting, casting orange light across the streets. At every red light, he caught glimpses of people crossing. Different faces, different walks of life. For the first time in a long while, he looked at them not as possible suspects, but as people living their lives, just as he did. When he finally parked outside his house, he sat there for a long while, engine off, watching the glow of the city fade into night. He thought about how easily he had justified his own actions, how natural it had felt to assume the worst without realizing it. The memory of the man's calm voice echoed again. Respect should never depend on color, only on character. It was a simple truth, but one that hit deeper than anything else that day. Inside the station, Mr. Green stayed late. He reviewed files, reports, and incident logs, noting patterns, reviewing behaviors, and planning training programs. But even as he worked, he thought of Daniels, not with anger, but with hope. He'd seen officers like him before, good men who had forgotten what the badge truly meant. For both men, that day marked a turning point. Daniels had met the very person who could end his career, yet that same person had offered him something far rarer, an opportunity to change. And though the night outside was quiet once more, neither of them felt it was the same kind of quiet as before. Something was shifting slowly but surely toward understanding. Weeks passed and life at the station slowly settled into a new rhythm. Officer Daniels was quieter now, more thoughtful than before. He still did his job, still followed the same routes, still wore the same uniform, but something inside him had shifted. He found himself second-guessing his instincts, questioning the thoughts that used to feel automatic. It wasn't about fear anymore. It was about awareness. Mr. Green's presence at the station became part of everyday life. Some officers treated him cautiously, others with respect, and a few with silent resentment. He wasn't harsh, but he paid attention. He walked through the halls, stopped by desks, and sometimes rode along during patrols. He didn't micromanage, he observed. That was enough to keep everyone on their best behavior. One quiet afternoon, Daniel sat at his desk writing up a report when Mr. Green stopped beside him. "Afternoon, officer," he said calmly. Daniels looked up quickly. "Afternoon, sir. Mind if I join your patrol today?" Mr. Green asked, his tone polite. Daniels hesitated. The last time they'd been face to face, he'd felt small, exposed. But he nodded. "Of course, sir." They left the station together, stepping into the mild sunshine. The air smelled of asphalt and blooming trees. Daniels tried to relax as he drove through familiar streets. Mr. Green sat beside him, looking out the window, silent for a while. "You've been on the force 13 years," Mr. Green said finally. "That's a lot of time in this city." "Yes, sir," Daniels replied. "I've seen it change a lot," Mr. Green nodded. "And what about you? Do you think you've changed with it?" Daniels thought for a moment before answering. "I used to think I had it all figured out," he admitted. Who looked suspicious, what areas were dangerous, what people to watch. I thought that was experience. Now I'm not so sure. Mr. Green gave a faint smile. Experience can teach you habits. But awareness, that teaches you perspective. They drove in silence for a few more blocks until a call came through the radio. "Unit 4, disturbance at East Maple. Possible domestic dispute." Daniels responded quickly, turning the siren on. The car moved through traffic smoothly. When they arrived, a small crowd had already gathered outside an apartment building. Two people were arguing loudly. A man and a woman, both upset, their voices sharp but not violent. Daniels parked and stepped out, keeping his tone calm as he approached. "Let's keep some space here," he said to the onlookers, then turned to the pair. "What's going on?" The man started to explain, his hands moving nervously. The woman interrupted, tears in her eyes, saying he had taken her phone and wouldn't give it back. It wasn't dangerous, just tense. In the past, Daniels might have been quick to raise his voice, to take control. But this time he took a breath. "Okay," he said gently. "Let's slow down. One at a time." Mr. Green stood nearby, quietly observing. Daniels listened to both sides, asked questions without judgment, and eventually got them both to calm down. The man handed over the phone, embarrassed. The woman nodded, her anger fading into relief. It ended without shouting, without handcuffs, just understanding. As they drove away, Mr. Green said softly, "You handled that well." Daniels glanced over, surprised. "Thank you, sir. I just tried to listen." "That's more than some officers do," Mr. Green said. "Listening isn't weakness. It's control through respect." Daniels smiled faintly. "I used to think respect had to be earned first." "It does," Mr. Green replied. "But you earn it by showing it." That evening, back at the station, Daniels stayed a little longer than usual. He sat in his car after his shift ended, thinking about the day. He realized something simple but powerful. He had been chasing control when what people really needed was reassurance. He wasn't supposed to be a threat. He was supposed to be a presence of safety. Over the next few weeks, Daniels made small but steady changes. He spoke more calmly to drivers, took more time with reports, and asked questions instead of making assumptions. Word spread quietly through the department that he had changed. Some teased him for it, calling him Mr. Green's student. He didn't mind. For once, he felt like he was actually doing his job right. One Friday afternoon, while filling out paperwork, Ramirez walked over. "Hey," he said with a grin. "You're not going to believe this. The guy from that coffee shop, you remember him?" Daniels froze for a second, then laughed. "How could I forget?" "He came by again today," Ramirez said. "Brought coffee for the station. Said he appreciated how things have been handled lately." Daniels blinked. "Really?" "Yeah," Ramirez said. "I think he noticed the difference." Daniels smiled quietly, not saying much. It wasn't about praise anymore. It was about peace of mind. That night, as he drove home, the city felt different. The streets he used to patrol with suspicion now seemed alive in a new way. Families walking, lights glowing in windows, laughter echoing from a nearby park. For the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like a guard watching over danger. He felt like a part of something worth protecting. Weeks later, during a staff meeting, Mr. Green addressed the room. He spoke about progress, accountability, and growth. "Change doesn't come from punishment," he said. "It comes from reflection. Every one of us has a duty, not just to enforce the law, but to honor the people it serves." When the meeting ended, he approached Daniels. "You've come a long way," he said quietly. Daniels shook his head humbly. "Still learning, sir." "We all are," Mr. Green said. Then after a pause, he added, "Maybe someday you'll be the one teaching others." Daniels smiled. "If that day comes, I'll remember this lesson." Mr. Green nodded approvingly. "That's all I'd hope for." Months later, Daniels did become a mentor to younger officers. He didn't preach or lecture, he just shared stories, real ones. About patience, about humility, about the cost of assuming too much. Sometimes he told them about a night when he made the biggest mistake of his career, and how it turned out to be the moment that saved it. He never said Mr. Green's name, but everyone knew who he meant. By the time the next review came around, Daniels was known for his fairness and calm approach. Complaints went down. Trust from the community went up. And though he never said it out loud, he carried that framed quote from Mr. Green's office in his heart. "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." One evening, as the sun dipped below the skyline, Daniel sat in his car outside the precinct. He looked at his reflection in the rearview mirror, the same face but softer somehow. He smiled faintly, turned the key, and started the engine. The city lights flickered to life around him, each one a reminder of why he chose this job in the first place. Not for authority, not for control, but for the people. The following spring brought a quiet energy to the city. The trees were green again, kids were out playing, and the long nights of winter were behind them. At the station, things were calmer too. Fewer complaints, fewer tense confrontations, and a little more laughter in the hallways. Something had shifted, not just in Officer Daniels, but in the entire team. It wasn't perfect, no department ever was, but the change was real. Daniels now carried himself differently. He wasn't the loudest in the room anymore or the one quick to speak. He had learned to pause, to listen before acting, to breathe before judging. The same streets he once drove through with suspicion now felt familiar, almost comforting. He'd learned the names of shop owners, waved at the old man who swept his porch every morning, and sometimes stopped to chat with teenagers hanging around after school. Small things, but meaningful ones. One warm morning, he walked into the station and found Mr. Green sitting in the break room, a cup of black coffee in hand. "Morning, officer," Mr. Green greeted him with a faint smile. "Morning, sir," Daniel said, pouring himself some coffee. "Didn't expect to see you here this early." "Old habits," Mr. Green replied. "I like seeing how things start before the day gets too busy." Daniels nodded, sitting down across from him. They talked for a bit. Nothing serious, just small talk about the city, the rising cost of gas, the weather. But then Mr. Green said something that caught Daniels off guard. "I'll be leaving soon," he said quietly. "Transferred to a different division. They want me to help set up a new training program." Daniels looked up sharply. "You're leaving?" Mr. Green nodded. "It's time. This place is doing better. You don't need me here anymore." Daniels leaned back in his chair, the news sinking in. "Well," he said after a moment, "you've made quite a difference," Mr. Green smiled. "I didn't do much. You all did. I just reminded you of what you already knew." Daniels hesitated before saying, "I'll miss having you around." "I know," Mr. Green said softly. "But that's the point, isn't it? The goal isn't for me to stay. It's for the lessons to stay." The two men sat in comfortable silence for a while. The hum of the vending machine filled the room. Finally, Daniels said, "You know, when you first walked into that station, I was terrified. Thought you were here to ruin me." Mr. Green chuckled quietly. "And now? Now I realize you were here to help me fix myself," Daniels said. "You didn't just make me a better officer. You made me a better man." Mr. Green looked at him, his expression warm but thoughtful. "That's what leadership is supposed to do. We all need someone to hold up a mirror sometimes. The real work is done when you face what you see." Before he left that day, Mr. Green gave Daniels a small envelope. "Don't open it yet," he said. "You'll know when the time is right." And with that, he was gone. Weeks went by, and the station settled back into routine. Daniels missed seeing Mr. Green's calm presence in the halls, but his words stuck like echoes in his mind. Whenever he handled a call or reviewed a report, he asked himself the same question: am I seeing the person or the assumption? One late evening, a call came through: an armed robbery in progress at a corner store near the west side. Daniels was one of the first units to respond. His heart raced as he drove, siren cutting through the night. When he arrived, the scene was tense. The suspect, a young man barely in his 20s, was standing outside, shaking, holding what looked like a weapon. Two officers had their guns drawn, shouting commands. The air was thick with fear. Daniels stepped out, raising a hand. "Hold on," he said to his fellow officers. "Let me try." He took a slow step forward. The young man looked terrified, his eyes darting between the officers. "Hey," Daniels called gently, "you don't want to do this, and stay back." The man shouted, his voice trembling. "I didn't mean to, I just needed money. My sister's sick." Daniels could see it now, the kid wasn't dangerous. The gun in his hand wasn't real. It was plastic, painted black to look real. Daniels kept his tone calm. "Listen, I get it. But this isn't the way. You can still fix this, all right? No one's hurt. Let's end it that way." The young man's shoulders trembled. His eyes filled with tears. Slowly, his hand lowered. The plastic gun dropped to the ground. Daniels walked up carefully, cuffed him without force, and led him to the car. The other officers stood back, watching quietly. When they got to the station, Daniels made sure the kid had water and a blanket. He didn't treat him like a criminal. He treated him like a person who made a bad decision in a moment of desperation. Later, when the paperwork was done, he sat alone in his car, staring at the dashboard. That's when he remembered the envelope. He pulled it from the glove box and opened it. Inside was a folded note in Mr. Green's neat handwriting. It read, "Daniels, if you're reading this, it means you face something real again. Remember what we talked about. Control through respect, not fear. You don't stop being human when you wear the badge. You start showing others what humanity looks like under pressure. Keep leading by example. The best kind of change happens quietly, one choice at a time." Underneath the note was the same quote Mr. Green had framed in his office. "Integrity is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching." Daniels smiled softly and leaned back in his seat. The city lights outside flickered across his windshield, and for a moment, he felt a quiet sense of peace, the kind of peace that came from knowing he was finally living the words he once ignored. Over the months that followed, Daniels took on a new role as a training officer. The rookies respected him, not because of rank, but because of how he treated people. He never yelled or lectured. He taught them to observe, to question, and most importantly, to care. "Everyone out there is carrying something," he told them one morning during training. "Some people carry anger, some carry fear, some carry hope. Our job isn't to judge what they carry. It's to make sure we don't add to their burden." His words stuck. Young officers began mirroring his tone, his patience, his respect. And slowly, the department's reputation changed. People in the community began greeting the officers again, waving at patrol cars instead of avoiding them. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One summer afternoon, Daniels was called to the mayor's office. He wasn't sure why. When he arrived, the mayor handed him a plaque. It read, "For exemplary service, compassion, and leadership in rebuilding community trust." The room applauded, but Daniels barely heard it. He was thinking about a man in a suit who had once walked into a noisy police station and changed everything without raising his voice. Later that night, Daniels visited a quiet park overlooking the city. He sat on a bench as the sun went down, the sky painted gold and orange. He thought about all that had happened, the mistakes, the lessons, the second chances, and as he sat there, he whispered softly, "Thank you, sir." A breeze passed through the trees, gentle and cool. For a moment it felt like a reply. Daniels smiled. He knew this was how it was meant to be. Change didn't need fanfare or attention. It just needed people willing to see each other clearly, willing to grow, willing to start again. And in that quiet moment he realized something. This wasn't the end of his story. It was just the beginning of his legacy. Years rolled by quietly and time changed the faces at the police station. Some retired, some moved away, and others joined with bright eyes and nervous energy, ready to take on the world. Officer Daniels, now Sergeant Daniels, had become a steady figure everyone looked up to. He wasn't loud or demanding. He was the kind of leader who led by example, by presence, by calmness. The department looked different now, too. Walls that were once covered in faded posters and old bulletins now displayed photos of community events. Officers playing basketball with kids, helping at food drives, visiting schools. The distance between the badge and the people had grown smaller. Daniels couldn't take all the credit, but he knew in his heart that his change had started a quiet ripple. Every Friday morning he held a small session with the new recruits. It wasn't official training, just a talk. He'd bring coffee, lean against the desk, and speak honestly. "You're going to see people at their worst," he would tell them, "but that doesn't mean you have to lose your best." The rookies always listened closely. Some took notes, others just watched him, as if trying to understand how a man who'd been through so much could sound so gentle. One morning, after one of those talks, a young officer lingered behind as the rest filed out. "Sir," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," Daniels said, setting his coffee down. "Was there ever a time you thought about quitting?" Daniels paused for a moment, thinking back. The flashing lights, the angry faces, the long nights filled with guilt and doubt. All of it flashed through his mind. He nodded slowly. "Yeah," he said. "More than once. What made you stay?" the young officer asked. Daniels smiled faintly. "Because someone once showed me that walking away doesn't fix what's broken. Staying and changing yourself, that's where the real work begins." The young officer nodded thoughtfully as if the words were sinking deep. Daniels watched him go and felt that quiet sense of fulfillment again. He didn't need to be remembered for anything big. If one person carried forward what he learned, that was enough. That evening, after finishing his shift, Daniels drove out to the same park he used to visit years ago. The city had grown brighter, louder, busier, but that little park on the hill still felt untouched. He sat on the old wooden bench under the same tree, watching the sunset wash the skyline in gold. For a while, he didn't think about reports or shifts or responsibilities. He just breathed. He thought about Mr. Green, the man who had come into his life at exactly the right time. The man who hadn't yelled, hadn't punished, but had held up a mirror and made him see. Daniels smiled as he remembered that first day in the briefing room, how small he had felt when Mr. Green introduced himself as the head of internal affairs. Back then, he'd been filled with pride, anger, fear. Now, all he felt was gratitude. He reached into his wallet and pulled out the old note Mr. Green had written him years ago. The paper was worn at the edges, but the words were still clear. He read them again slowly, letting each sentence rest in his heart. Control through respect, not fear. Show humanity under pressure. Change happens quietly, one choice at a time. Daniels folded the note carefully and put it back. He knew those words weren't just advice, they had become a way of living. As the sun dipped lower, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning, he saw a young woman in uniform walking toward him. She stopped and saluted softly. "Sergeant, sorry to interrupt," she said. "They said you might be here," he smiled. "It's all right."
What's up?
"They want you at the station tomorrow morning. The chief's putting together a new mentorship program, and they'd like you to lead it." Daniels nodded slowly, his smile widening. "Tell them I'll be there." As she walked away, he sat back and laughed quietly to himself. Life had a strange way of circling back. Once he'd been the one needing guidance. Now he was the one others looked to. When the next morning came, the station was buzzing with excitement. A new group of recruits had just joined. Daniel stood in front of them, his voice calm but full of warmth. "You might think this job is about control," he began. "It's not. It's about service. About people. You'll meet all kinds, some angry, some scared. Remember, how you treat them says more about you than it does about them." He paused, letting the silence settle before continuing. "Every day you wear this badge, you carry a choice. You can add to someone's pain or you can help lighten it. The badge doesn't give you power over people. It gives you the chance to protect them, even from their worst moments." There was quiet in the room when he finished. He saw nods, thoughtful expressions, and even a few smiles. It was enough. After the session, one of the recruits came up to him. "Sir," she said, "where did you learn all this?" Daniels thought for a moment. "From someone who believed in me before I believed in myself," he said simply. That night he visited the old police memorial near the city square. It was quiet there, with rows of engraved names under soft lights. He placed a small folded paper at the base of the monument, a copy of the letter Mr. Green had written him. He whispered softly, "Your words still work, sir. They're still changing people." He stood there for a while, letting the cool wind brush against his face. He felt no heaviness anymore, no regret, only peace. As he walked back to his car, the city lights flickered like stars. He thought about all the people he'd met, all the mistakes, all the lessons. He realized that growth wasn't something that happened once. It was something you chose every single day. Before he drove off, he looked into the rearview mirror. His reflection stared back at him, older, calmer, wiser. He smiled. "You did all right," he whispered. Years later, stories about Sergeant Daniels were still told to new recruits. About the officer who once made a mistake that could have ended his career, but turned it into a lesson that changed an entire department. They called him the quiet reformer. No statue was built for him. No speeches were made. But his legacy lived on in every act of kindness, every fair decision, every moment of patience that rippled through the force. And in some quiet corner of the world, another young officer, someone Daniels had once trained, stood facing a difficult choice. In that moment, she heard his words echo in her mind. Respect over fear. Humanity under pressure. She took a deep breath, made the right call, and walked forward with steady hands. That was how real change survived, not in headlines or awards, but in the choices passed from one heart to another. And somewhere, if the wind could carry gratitude, maybe Mr. Green heard it too.